Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to talk about a scenario that for years was discussed in whispers, rumors and political analysis, but now seems closer to reality than ever before. The possibility of a coup in Belarus. This is not a movie plot or a distant hypothetical situation. This is a serious discussion about power, pressure, loyalty, fear, and the slow cracking of a system that has been tightly controlled for decades. Belarus has long been known as one of Europe's most authoritarian states, ruled by President Alexander Lukashenko since 1994. For nearly 3 decades, power has been concentrated in one man and a small circle of loyal elites. Elections have been widely criticized as unfair, opposition voices silenced, and protests crushed with force. For years, this system appeared stable on the surface, but beneath it, tensions were steadily building. The idea of a coup in Belarus is not new. Analysts have talked about it for years, especially after the massive protests of 2020. Those protests shook the regime in a way never seen before. Hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets, demanding fair elections and an end to authoritarian rule. The state responded with arrests, violence, and fear. While the protests were eventually suppressed, they left deep scars within society and even within the state apparatus itself. What makes the current situation different is that the pressure is now coming from multiple directions at the same time. Internally, there is widespread dissatisfaction among citizens, workers, students, and even some state employees. Externally, Belarus faces heavy sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and increasing dependence on Russia. This combination has created a fragile balance that could tip at any moment. One of the most important factors in any coup scenario is the loyalty of the security forces. In Belarus, the police, military, and intelligence services have traditionally been loyal to Lukashenko. They have been well-funded, privileged, and protected. However, loyalty based on fear and benefits can weaken when the system starts to fail. Reports of dissatisfaction, quiet resignations, and internal disagreements have been growing, even if they are not openly visible. Economic pressure is another key element. Sanctions have hit Belarus hard. State-owned industries, which form the backbone of the economy, are struggling. Inflation, declining wages, and reduced living standards affect not only ordinary citizens, but also members of the elite and security services. When economic pain spreads to those who protect the regime, the risk of internal fracture increases. The role of Russia cannot be ignored. Belarus is heavily dependent on Moscow for political, economic, and military support. Lukashenko has survived in part because of Russian backing. However, this support comes at a price. Belarus has gradually lost autonomy, becoming more of a satellite state. Some within the Belarusian elite may see this as a threat to national sovereignty and their own long-term interests. At the same time, Russia's own challenges, including international isolation and military commitments elsewhere, limit how much support it can realistically provide. If Moscow perceives Lukashenko as a liability rather than an asset, its stance could change. History shows that when external backers withdraw or hesitate, authoritarian leaders become extremely vulnerable. Another critical aspect is the opposition, both inside and outside the country. Many opposition leaders are in exile, but they remain active, organized, and connected to Western governments and international institutions. They continue to highlight human rights abuses and push for pressure on the regime. While they may not directly lead a coup, their actions contribute to delegitimizing the government and encouraging internal dissent. Information control has also become more difficult. Despite censorship and state media dominance, people in Belarus still access independent news through social media, messaging apps, and foreign platforms. This constant flow of information weakens propaganda and allows alternative narratives to spread. When people stop believing official stories, fear loses its power. A coup does not necessarily mean tanks rolling through the streets or dramatic televised announcements. In many cases, coups happen quietly. A sudden announcement of leadership change, a declaration of emergency, or a reshuffling of power behind closed doors can signal that control has shifted. In Belarus, such a scenario could involve high-ranking officials, security chiefs, or political insiders deciding that Lukashenko is no longer capable of protecting their interests. Age and health are also factors that cannot be ignored. Lukashenko is no longer a young man, and long-term rule takes a toll. Uncertainty about succession creates anxiety within the elite. When there is no clear plan for what comes next, people start making their own calculations. This is often when conspiracies and power struggles emerge. Public mood plays a silent but powerful role. Even if people are not protesting in large numbers, widespread apathy and quiet resistance can be dangerous for a regime. When citizens stop believing in the system, stop participating, and stop cooperating, governance becomes increasingly difficult. This slow erosion of legitimacy can be just as threatening as open rebellion. International reaction would be crucial if a coup were to occur. Western countries would likely react cautiously, calling for stability, dialogue, and respect for human rights. Russia would assess whether the new leadership aligns with its interests. The outcome would depend largely on who takes control and how the transition is managed. It is also important to understand that not all coups lead to positive change. Some simply replace one authoritarian leader with another. In Belarus, there is a real risk that a coup could result in a military-backed or security-backed government that maintains tight control while changing faces at the top. True democratic transition is far more complex and uncertain. However, the mere fact that a coup scenario is being discussed more openly suggests that the regime's image of invincibility is cracking. Authoritarian systems rely heavily on the perception that they are permanent and unchangeable. Once that perception fades, everything becomes more unstable. Fear has been one of Lukashenko's strongest tools. Fear of prison, fear of violence, fear of losing jobs. But fear can only work for so long. When people feel they have nothing left to lose, fear transforms into anger or indifference. Both are dangerous for those in power. Another layer of complexity is the generational divide. Younger Belarusians have grown up connected to the world through the internet. They compare their lives to those in neighboring countries and see what is possible. This generation is less willing to accept isolation, censorship, and stagnation. Over time, this creates pressure that no amount of repression can fully eliminate. The security services themselves are made up of individuals with families, concerns, and doubts. They see the same economic problems and international isolation. If orders become too extreme or the future too uncertain, cracks can appear even in the most disciplined institutions. A coup could be triggered by a single unexpected event. It could be a sudden economic collapse, a disputed decision, the health crisis, or a major international incident. Often it is not the long-term problems alone, but the final spark that ignites them. Belarus stands at a crossroads. One path leads to deeper repression, isolation, and dependence. The other, though risky and uncertain, offers the possibility of change. Whether that change comes through a coup, negotiations, or gradual transformation remains unclear. What is clear is that the old assumptions no longer hold. The idea that Lukashenko's rule is unshakable has been fundamentally challenged. The system is under stress, and history shows that when pressure builds long enough, something eventually gives. For ordinary Belarusians, the situation is filled with anxiety and hope at the same time. Anxiety because change often brings instability and risk. Hope because even the possibility of change suggests that the future does not have to look like the past. The international community watches closely, knowing that what happens in Belarus will affect regional security, relations with Russia, and the broader balance of power in Eastern Europe. Belarus is no longer a forgotten country on the map. It has become a key piece in a much larger geopolitical puzzle. In the end, a coup scenario becoming real is not about one dramatic moment. It is about years of accumulated pressure, mistakes, resistance, and shifting loyalties. It is about people inside the system making decisions based on fear, ambition, and survival. Whether a coup happens tomorrow, next year, or not at all, the fact that it is now seen as plausible marks a historic shift. Belarus has entered a period of uncertainty, and uncertainty is the greatest enemy of authoritarian control. As events continue to unfold, one thing remains certain: Belarus is changing, slowly, painfully, and unpredictably, but undeniably. The question is no longer whether the system can remain exactly as it is, but how and when it will transform. And that is why the Belarus coup scenario is no longer just a theory. It is a real possibility shaped by internal cracks, external pressure, and a society that has already shown it is no longer willing to remain silent forever.